Now that we have the very basic block out, we're going to go into a stage where we model things out properly, but also before I even start that, I'm going to create a small library of pieces that I'll be using. So I'll have a unified design language on the entire thing. I often reuse these pieces, but I also quite often create new ones specifically for a project, just because to avoid that things look the same in the fine details. So I often create new screws, new kind of indentations and so on. So we're going to start with creating some screws and like screw heads and rivets, and also some cutters that we'll be using for cutting out detail for booleans. So the cutters are the easiest ones, because I normally just take some very simple shapes like this, for example. I quite often use booleans to create cutters for booleans. So, for example, like this. Now, if we use this, actually we can some more stuff with this. So, for example, if we take this, and we put it here, just get it way down for this to work. This one. I get something like this, for example. So I'm quite often doing those inverted cutters, so which takes a bit of backwards thinking. Think how things will look when you actually cut them out. What you can do is that you can also take this, and then you take the result here, and you copy paste it and flip it, and then just fill the holes, just create a polygon. So, for example, if you actually do something in some other place and you want to reuse that, you can actually reuse the cutter by create a cutter mesh from it by just copying the outcome and then just flipping it, basically. So now I'm just going to go ahead and create a few more cutter meshes. I'll do a few basic ones, like this. And some cylindrical ones. Something like that, maybe. Some variation on this. Put some cuts in this one. Now, what you can do with these ones is that you can put a different material on these, which will transfer over when you're doing the booleans. So I'm just gonna select these polygons here and then set them to a new material. Let's call it metal 2. Make this one slightly darker. And then do the same on this one. That way everything at this depth will have a different material for when we're doing the texturing and shading later, which will, you know, help speed up the material, applying the material process. So I think maybe we can use a few more. Sometimes it's hard to know which ones will be useful when you're just designing something, you know, like this, without any real concept or anything from beforehand. So sometimes I end up making lots of these, you know, kit bash pieces and cutters that I end up not using at all, which of course is perfectly fine. So let's just grab that. All right. So I think this is enough for the Boolean cutters, but I also need some screws and some floating decals. So I'm gonna create I'm gonna create a box here, and I'm just gonna delete this and leave that as is. Put this material on it. It's, you know, very basic little rivet head. And I'm going to create a cylinder. I'm going to use way less number of sides here, because I don't need that many. Just cut it like this. Delete that one. And I'm just gonna take this and use the edge creasing to harden that. That's a good way to just save polygons, especially when you're doing these small meshes that you're gonna copy paste around a lot. So less geo to deal with. Just gonna apply that shader to it. And I also want to have some shapes that I can just attach. So, for example, I want to make something like this. You know, super basic detail. Just gonna take these and flatten them. And this one needs to be pretty sharp, so I'm just gonna use the loop slice tool here. Something like this. Very basic, but now I can just easily tack this onto surfaces and have a like nice soft transition. I can also do this with the rounded shader, but I'm gonna use this little edge here as well to demonstrate, because it gives you a slightly better result when you're working with flat surfaces. So next up is some more complex surfaces, I guess we can call them. Not that complex though. So I'm gonna make something like this, some arrows and some other, you know, basically metal extrusions, pretty much like all of these are, because I don't want to use only flat decals. I want to use some with a little bit of like geometry as well, because it feels, you know, more retro, less you know, sleek sci-fi. I don't want, you know, just cool sci-fi decals. I want them to be built into the weapon. So I'm just going to harden this up a bit. Probably put cut here. Even this out a bit. Something like that. Let's do a similar thing with a circle. This, bevel it out and delete it. Let's cut this here. Might have a bit too much volume, so I'm just gonna take this and scale it down a bit, move it in. Harden this one up. Oh. That will work, and I just want to make one last square one as well, just to make sure I have all my basic shapes covered. I'll probably come up with more later on, but these are like the basic ones that I'll be using, or I hope that I'll be using. I'm not sure yet. We'll see as the design develops. I do try to put a little bit more detail into these than just a box, because then there's no point in making a custom one like this. I could just be making like fresh new ones all the time, right? I'm just gonna make sure that these are all same metal surface as well. So if I would take this one, just put it over here, you can see how it will look. Something like that. Okay, great. So a couple more things and then we're good to go. So now we've only been doing these floating elements that are extruded from the surface. Now we're going to do some that do the opposite. So I'm just going to take this one and basically invert it. Here we have a little hole. I'm going to do the same. Do it like this. So the reason why I'm not putting, because what you can do is here is you can take an edge, do an edge extrude here, and you have like a similar thing as you have here with the lip on the floater. The reason why I'm not always doing that on floating elements that are supposed to go inwards is because if you have something like that, it works great to put on flat surfaces, but doesn't work on like any curved surfaces. But if you don't have any actual lip on this, you can't tell the difference really without looking for a profile. So it works really well just to hide things. So I use those quite a lot. So now that we have all the basic pieces that we need, I'm gonna go ahead and start detailing things up a bit. So I'm going to take a quick pass on the site here. Just level it a bit. So the goal with this image is that, you know, I'm going to render it out from a couple of angles and present it as well as possible. And so I'm not going to go necessarily, you know, all the way with the details in this as I would in a production asset. So we're keeping it relatively simple for you guys. So the main tools I will be using almost the entire time is the primitives, bevels, and booleans. Those are pretty much the main tools that I use, both in production, you know, for production art and for in just design work. So if you take something like this here, you know, it's very sloppy, and I'm just basically pushing this into this surfaces so it intersects. And once we get to the shading stage, shading and texturing and so on, I'm gonna go in deeper in how I'll be using the rounded shader and so on. So almost everything that we will be doing here now is going to look quite, you know, temporary, because you don't have that nice those nice highlights that you get when you were working with sub D, for example. So it's a bit tricky, because a lot of people have difficulties working with this method a bit, because you don't instantly see what the result will be like, but you will see it down the road when you're doing like test renders and so on. So it's a bit hard before you get used to it. Right. That's pretty cool. Let's see if I can design something here. Using the booleans allow you to take a lot of shortcuts in modeling that you wouldn't normally do. So instead of using sub-D modeling and creating, you know, correct edge loops, I can take something like this and just subtract it, and you know, it's so wrong because you have all these like n-gons and stray edges, but all that stuff doesn't matter when you're just doing the high poly and the design work. So we're just gonna ignore all that. So a lot of the references I have, you know, in my head are from old rifles and so on. And what I love about those is just, you know, the different cutouts and shapes of the metal surfaces combined with this, you know, rough metal finish, so that it's you get all these nice little you know, pockets of dirt and wear and so on. So I really want to try to catch that with this weapon. So and it's not going to rely so much on, you know, hyper detailing on the metal surfaces, like you know, tons of little sci-fi indentations and so on. It's going to have a lot of areas that are relatively clean. So I want to have a lot of these, you know, this depth and, you know, little indentations and weird cutouts that, you know, old rifles have in the few areas where, you know, I have the detailing. So for example, in this area here, there will be quite a lot of, you know, high frequency detail. And then this one, these will be relatively clean. We just select detail and then this area here, probably this area here will also have, and this area here will also have lots of supporting detail, and this area here and this one will be relatively clean. So I'm going to try to see if I can do something interesting there. Okay, so let's do more cutouts. Something like this. One thing also I need to add is probably some kind of a little lock mechanism here between the for the reload. Probably block that in now as well in a minute. So I'm just gonna create some, imaginary functionality here. A lot of the time when I'm doing this, so for example now I know that I want to put something here. I'm not quite sure what it's gonna be, so I'm just gonna quickly box it in, so it's there, and it's just gonna let me think about it for a little bit while I'm off doing other things. So it's just one way of working that I use to keep my pace up. If I would sit and think on these design problems, try to figure this stuff out, I would have to stop working and sit and think a bit. And I don't have time for that, especially not when I'm doing this, a live recording demo like this. So I'm just gonna keep on doodling on things until inspiration strikes me, and then I can go back and just do another little pass.